In a time long ago, a time without streets or lamps or clocks to alert you that night had fallen, night would arrive quietly, like heavy clouds. It would sneak through the trees and drape over cold rocks until a person knew it was time to sleep. People would look to the sky, knowing that when the sun set, life closed its doors. They would light a small fire in the middle of the cave or by a wall, sleeping around it, their faces illuminated by the fire in a pale orange hue, their bodies covered by the skins of animals they had hunted by day. There were no beds or soft pillows, just a pile of dry grass, the fur of a massive bear, or a straw mat. Humans slept like wolves, curled up listening to the sound of the wind, the dripping water from the cave ceiling, and the repetitive rhythm of breaths, for everyone slept together for protection and warmth. No one stayed up late, there were no books to read, and no candles lasted long enough. The fire was fed with slow-burning branches, and when it dimmed, everyone knew it was time to close their eyes. Even dreams were too simple to recount. Perhaps one dreamt of a small rabbit they couldn't catch, or of rain suddenly falling on the river. No one asked the meaning of such dreams. They passed like a breeze through the cave opening. Thus, sleep was a ritual, akin to sunset. Not something done by choice, but because the entire world was asleep. From this video, we will return to those forgotten eras. We will sneak into the homes of the pharaohs, observe the lanterns in Roman gardens, ascend to stone chambers of the Middle Ages, and walk barefoot with sleeping pilgrims in the heart of the desert. We return to when sleep was simple and warm, to a time when dreams were more honest and the night darker. In the very beginning, when humans were learning to make fire and the earth itself breathed around them, sleep was a necessity, not a luxury, with no specific timing. They slept when their bones grew weary, when the pangs of hunger quieted, and when darkness crept from behind the mountains, swallowing what remained of the day. Stone Age humans slept in caves, under dense trees, or among large rocks resembling the mouths of dormant beasts. They chose places that felt safe rather than comfortable, for there was no bedding, just a patch of land less harsh than others. In the heart of the cave, a small fire burned quietly, as if whispering, "Sleep now." They took care to feed it with dry wood, for it was their light, warmth, and primary weapon against the dark and unknown. The fire cast a faint, misty light, turning cave walls into dancing canvases of shadow and light. Sleep itself was neither long nor stable. Humans would sleep, then wake to check the fire, listen for external sounds, and slowly return to sleep. They slept in groups, children in the middle, surrounded by arms and backs on all sides, with adults distributed around them like a protective belt. Primitive dogs or tame wolves might lie beside them, sensing danger before it approached. They covered the ground with whatever they found, animal skins, tree branches, or even a layer of dry leaves spread over cold mud. No soft pillows or warm blankets, just nature in its raw, solid, and yet familiar state. Sounds formed a constant backdrop to sleep. Water dripping from the cave ceiling, the creaking of wood in the weak fire, or the howl of a distant wolf, not frightening them, but reminding them they were not alone. Their lives had no distractions, no artificial light, no notifications to worry about, no late nights behind screens. The night stretched long, and drowsiness overcame them like a branch yielding to the wind. Occasionally, someone would dream, perhaps of a river full of fish, or of flying with birds. But no one asked the meaning of dreams. They did not know they were symbols or messages, merely images that passed and faded like smoke. Thus, sleep in the Stone Age was part of nature, uncomplicated and uncorrupted. They slept as the night slept over the mountains, slowly, silently, and without need for interpretation. In a distant land where the Tigris meets the Euphrates, where writing, clay, and the plow were born, great civilizations thrived. The sun measured time for them, and sleep held its sanctity. In Sumer, sleep was not just rest after toil, but a journey to a mysterious realm called the world of dreams, where spirits resided, and gods sent encrypted messages deciphered by priests, interpreted by kings, and believed by all. People lived in houses of dried clay. Bedrooms were small with low ceilings, walls made of mud brick and straw, and narrow windows allowing only moonlight to enter. At the end of the evening, oil lamps were lit with a small flame, casting a faint yellow light resembling the color of silence. People slept on reed mats or low clay beds, covered with handmade fabrics of wool or linen. Beds were arranged near the eastern wall of the house, for the east signified light and beginnings. And because Mesopotamia was known for intense daytime heat, sleep was sometimes delayed until after sunset. They took short naps during the day and returned to long sleep at night when the earth cooled and winds whispered through palm fronds. Dreams were important. The Babylonians believed God spoke to humans during sleep, and dreamless sleep lacked divine care. Nabu, the god of wisdom and writing, was invoked. Kings had personal dream interpreters to whom they recounted their visions. Each dream was recorded on clay tablets in cuneiform for later interpretation, as if it were a prophecy. Among ancient incantations was one recited before sleep. O God, you who walk quietly in the dark, protect me in my sleep and immerse me in a dream that does not frighten my heart. Thus, sleep in Mesopotamia was not merely rest, but a nightly encounter with hidden forces. Humans extinguished the fire of their day and sank into the mystery of the night, reassured or anxious as the gods decreed. In a civilization nurtured on the banks of the Nile, where sun meets sand and water meets wisdom, night arrived with a weight that did not frighten but guided. In ancient Egypt, sleep was not merely a transient act, but an extension of a complete belief system in which the human soul embarked on a short journey and returned, if the gods willed. The Egyptian word for sleep was close to temporary rest, and it was likened to death, not because it was terrifying, but because it was sacred. The soul, called the Ba, left the body during sleep, hovered in the sky, and returned at sunrise. Because they believed sleep resembled death, they loved, feared, and respected it all at once. Before sleep, An Egyptian prepared as if for an important journey. They cleansed their body with running water, anointed themselves with lotus, mint, or cinnamon oils, and chose a piece of white linen to wrap themselves in. They lay quietly on a low bed made of ropes stretched over a simple wooden frame. Beds were often oriented eastward, toward sunrise and life. The body prepared for resurrection each morning. A small oil lamp was placed in the middle of the room, its wick emitting a golden light that danced on clay walls, casting a silence deeper than the night itself. On a small table beside the bed sat a water vessel and a faience amulet painted with the eye of Horus or a small inscription: "Protect the sleeper from wandering spirits." In simple homes, families slept close together, sharing the room, light, and even air. Children slept in corners, wrapped in linen or coarse wool covers. Sacred creatures like cats walked between feet or settled on a sleeper's chest, as if guarding their dreams and dispelling worries. The wealthy had private bedrooms adorned with hieroglyphic inscriptions, perfumes, and dried flowers. Beds were higher, made of wood decorated with ivory or gold, and included a wooden headrest, a curved piece to elevate the head, examples of which have been found in royal tombs. Yet, despite the adornment and luxury, the idea was the same. Sleep was the soul's departure, and every soul needed protection. Egyptians believed nightmares were not mere illusions, but warnings or traces of external forces. Entire texts for dream interpretation were inscribed on papyrus, speaking of symbols. A crocodile meant an enemy. Falling meant failure. Flying meant freedom or death. Priests practiced a special ritual called incubation sleep or temple sleep, where the sleeper stayed in a temple overnight, hoping to see a god in their dream. If they saw, they spoke. If not, they remained silent. Sleep was also medicine. In healing temples like that of Imhotep, patients were asked to sleep in blessed places, anoint their bodies with oils, and await a solution in their dreams. Sometimes incense was used to dispel troubling spirits. A mother would sing to her child, "O sleep, messenger of the gods, take him gently and return him to me safely at dawn." Thus, sleep in ancient Egypt was a complete spiritual experience, not beginning with closed eyes, but with soul preparation, ending with the Ba's return to the body at the first sunbeam. On the quiet plains where the Indus River flows, in cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, where baked brick formed walls and breezes moved through straight alleyways as if knowing the path, a silent civilization lived, slept, and passed like the wind. In the Indus Valley civilization, sleep was part of the order upon which cities, homes, and life itself were built. There was no noise, only a faint system like the earth's breathing.
Houses were carefully designed, with 1 or 2 stories and thick brick walls, providing shade by day and retaining warmth by night, making rooms suitable for sleep even on the coldest nights. Bedrooms were built in the inner corners of the home, away from noise, close to the inner courtyard, where moonlight fell quietly on the earthen floor and leaves swayed among shadows. A bed, if present, was a low wooden platform or a hand-woven straw mat covered with simple cloth. The sleeper rested on a small pillow made of cotton, wool, or even a soft block of straw. Air crept through upper ventilation openings, while an earthen lamp burned with a small flame, giving faint light insufficient for reading, but enough to feel life breathing quietly.
Sleep for the people of the Indus Valley was not a religious ritual as in Egypt or Babylon, but a return to balance, to silence, to the inner self. People began their day with sunlight and ended it when the orange color disappeared from the walls. We have no religious texts referring to dream interpretation or inscriptions about gods guarding sleepers, but relics tell of people who lived with cleanliness, order, and stillness, as if they believed the night did not frighten, but repaired what the day had spoiled. Sleep was not disappearance, but a necessary silent rest in a civilization that did not speak much, but recorded its existence through brick, water, and silence. The city slept as its people once did under earthen walls, amid silent drainage pipes and alleyways still standing, waiting for someone to dream of them anew. When the sun withdraws behind the mountains and the wind stills its breath among bamboo poles, the village returns to its silence, a silence not like stillness, but like an ancient wisdom understood without words. In ancient China, where life was built on harmony and regulated by seasons, stars, and the dragon's changes in the sky, sleep was a sacred act, not only rest for the body, but a return inward to the self. Taoist philosophers saw sleep as a moment when energies balanced. Yin was darkness, stillness, and moisture, and sleep was the time of yin. If one did not sleep, balance was disrupted. If balance was disrupted, the body corrupted and the small world within trembled. In small villages, where houses were made of earth and flat wood, the ground was spread with straw mats, and a paper lantern on the wall cast a yellow light like an ancient tale. People slept on their sides, covering themselves with silk covers if available, or coarse linen for the poor. A bed, if present, was slightly elevated with a wooden headrest, sometimes decorated, and underneath a small earthen stove used for warmth in winter. A child slept beside its mother, who sang a tuneless song repeated by nature. Sleep, for the mountains are asleep, the river is asleep, and the bird on the branch has closed its eyes. Before sleep, the Chinese drank warm water and washed their feet, believing pure sleep began from the feet, where energy passed inward. In major cities like Chang'an or Luoyang, the wealthy slept in large rooms adorned with silk curtains, perfumed with sandalwood or dried lotus flowers. Yet even they slept with a quietness resembling a farmer's sleep in his hut, for China taught them that luxury did not abolish harmony, and that night did not distinguish between prince and woodcutter.
Confucian texts said good sleep was a sign of an orderly mind, and those who thought too much spoiled their dreams. Thus, they regulated the day precisely so not to weary the mind or body, and humans slept as trees sleep, without noise, struggle, or anxiety. They saw dreams as messages, but did not overinterpret them, instead listening in silence and allowing time for the dream to explain itself, or not. In some Buddhist monasteries, monks slept in rows on wooden planks without pillows or covers, breathing as one body. They slept at sunset and awoke with the first bird opening its wings, a rhythm unbroken. In ancient Chinese imagination, sleep was not just rest, but a gateway to hidden worlds where spirits met and ancestors whispered what was unspoken by day. Sleep in ancient China was a chapter of nature, a pillar of harmony, and a faint voice of wisdom lived, not recorded. When the sun sets behind the columns of the Acropolis and the colors of the sky slowly fade, like words withdrawing from the mouth of a tired poet, Athens descends into its silence, a silence not like quiet, but like deep, unspoken thought. In ancient Greece, sleep was not merely a physical act, but a philosophical subject, a poetic theme, and a sacred matter. It was one of the gods' children, son of Nyx, goddess of night, and brother of Thanatos, god of death. In Greek eyes, sleep and death were brothers, distinguished only by time.
In simple homes of stone and mud, people slept on wooden beds spread with goatskin or pieces of linen. Pillows were made of wool or straw, placed only under the neck, for comfort was not the goal, but balance. Air entered bedrooms through a small window opening east, where the sun rose first, so people awoke with the first thread of light, as the sea awakens to the harbor. Wives retired to sleep after extinguishing oil lamps, gathering earthenware and closing the outer door with a small iron chain that made a soft sound like a thread of rain touching marble. Children slept on mats, and on winter nights they drew near the stone heater, where smoke gathered at the ceiling, leaving its scent on pillows, a scent resembling time. The wealthy knew decorated beds, padded chairs, and fabrics from Egypt. Yet even in their palaces, sleep remained sacred. They kept a small statue of Hypnos, god of sleep, near the bed, as if sleep needed an invitation. Sleep was not a moment of forgetfulness, but of passage. It was believed dreams were messages from the gods, sent by Morpheus, god of dreams, who slipped through windows and sat on the edge of the pillow to whisper the unspoken of the day. In temples, rituals of incubation were practiced, where a visitor slept in the temple, awaiting a dream for the priest to interpret in the morning, upon which decisions were based to heal, to travel, to love, or to forget. Sleep was part of healing, especially in temples of Asclepius, god of medicine, where patients were asked to sleep, to dream, then recount their visions, and treatment was built not on the body,
but on the soul. The night in Athens was quiet, interrupted only by wind among columns, the bark of a distant dog, or the steps of a philosopher late to sleep, pondering meaning, or perhaps pondering nothing. Sleep was seen as an intellectual necessity, not merely biological. A mind that did not rest produced no sound thought. Aristotle said the mind, when sleeping, produced imaginary images, not all false. In theater, entire plays spoke of long sleep or dreams that changed the hero's fate. Even poets wrote of sleep as a sea in which humans drown without getting wet. In the countryside, sleep began with sunset and ended with the rooster's crow. No clock, no schedule, only with nature. The earth slept and had the right to awaken those upon it. Thus, sleep in ancient Greece was part of a life that thought, contemplated, and knew rest was not weakness, but wisdom. When the last torch is extinguished on the edges of the Roman Forum and moonlight spills over columns like cold oil, the city, that city full of movement, withdraws into a silence not like rest, but like order, as if even sleep obeyed an imperial law written in stone. In ancient Rome, sleep was not random nor even intimate as in previous civilizations. It was a bodily function performed and then discarded. So the Romans believed, or were led to believe. Romans slept in rooms called cubicula or cubiculum, small, narrow spaces containing little. A low wooden bed covered with straw or wool bedding, a stone or wooden headrest, and perhaps a small cross later on. By day, the cubiculum was used for reading or rest. By night, heavy curtains closed and isolation began.
The wealthy, those who lived in domus, had larger rooms adorned with mosaics, delicate fabric curtains, and oil lamps carefully placed on marble tables. But sleep was not much different. They slept early and awoke before sunrise, as if the sun did not begin its day before them. In winter, the ancient Roman heating system, hypocast, was used, where heat passed under the floor to warm the room from below. One slept on warmth rising from the earth, unseen but felt like an unspoken longing. Sleep in Rome was segmented, divided into two phases: first sleep after sunset, then a brief awakening at midnight for contemplation, note-taking, prayer, or perhaps whispered conversation, then return to second sleep. The night itself had two chapters. Slaves and servants slept on the ground near hearths or inside storerooms. No bed, no pillow, only a folded cloak and a wall that did not block the wind, but was at least there. Soldiers slept in orderly rows on the ground, wrapping themselves in cloaks and placing swords under their heads, not for comfort, but for caution. For them, sleep was a duty performed silently, then ended. In Roman texts, dreams are mentioned hesitantly, left to poets, while philosophers saw sleep as a necessity without emotion. Even Seneca once said, "Sleep is a rest for the mind, but also a kind of lethargy. The Roman spirit did not love laziness, even when sleeping. But deep down, Romans knew an unspoken secret. The body does not always obey swords. It demands a moment of forgetfulness, a moment of weakness called sleep. Thus, mothers kept the habit of lullabies, singing to children in the evening with faint voices, as if pleading with the gods to grant a night without worry. In rural homes outside Rome, sleep was more honest. Under thatched roofs, beside burning fires, the farmer slept after a long day in the fields, asking no philosophy, caring not for class hierarchy, sleeping as olives sleep in their jar, quiet and submerged in time. Thus, sleep in ancient Rome was part of habit, part of law, and part of the silence the emperor needed to think of tomorrow. When Europe was groaning under the darkness of ignorance and the West was extinguishing ugly lamps of thought, the Islamic East was lighting lamps of knowledge one by one until the night was no longer frightening, but a time for reading. In Baghdad, Cordoba, Naishapur, Cairo, in the Islamic Golden Age, sleep was not a moment of laziness, but a moment of recharging for a nation that made reading the first command from heaven. People slept after the evening prayer as the Prophet recommended, and awoke before dawn, then returned to their beds or opened a Quran or wrote a line in a book. In simple homes, beds were made of wood, spread with cotton or wool pillows, and covered with locally woven blankets, often embroidered with supplications or verses, so even the cover was a prayer. In the homes of scholars and doctors, wooden shelves near the bed held books on medicine, engineering, astronomy, and mysticism. A book by Ibn Sina of Avicenna, another by Al-Razi. Sleep was part of an intellectual project that began by day and continued even in dreams. Sleep was important, but not excessive. Scholars said, the night is for sleep, but not all of it. They slept moderately, awoke for knowledge, then returned to sleep quietly and assuredly, like those who had accomplished something in this world. In hospitals, or bimaristans as they were called, patients were also treated with sleep. Doctors understood that sleep was medicine, like medicine itself. So they built quiet wards with comfortable beds, faint light, perfume of rose or amber, and the sound of a distant flute. Sleep itself was treatment.
Even in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, time was allotted for sleep. Muslims understood early that the mind does not work without rest and does produce without calm, so they made sleep one of the pillars of thought. In some schools, especially in Andalusia, small rooms were designated for students' temporary sleep, called Khalwat el-Raha, or rest cells, containing a mat, a lamp, and a breeze from a narrow window. The student would sleep, then awake and continue what he had begun of grammar, arithmetic, or geometry. In villages, people slept in houses of clay or mud brick, spreading the ground with a simple rug and placing a wool pillow. On summer nights, they slept on roofs, looking at the sky and saying,
Glory to you. You did not create this in vain. Then, closing their eyes and letting the soul travel in a quiet dream, they taught their children the etiquette of sleep, to mention God's name, to sleep on the right side, to extinguish the fire, and to say the supplication, O God, in your name I die and I live. Even in wars, the Muslim soldier knew how to sleep. He placed his sword near his pillow, but slept with an intention of safety, not killing. They said, sleep with the intention of dawn, and awake with the intention of work. In Damascus, some perfumers sold sleep oils, lavender and jasmine oil, dropped at night and smelled before sleep. The scent was an invitation to temporary forgetfulness. In mosques, there was always someone sleeping in the back corner, not out of laziness, but rest between two acts of worship. This sleep was blessed for being in a pure place at a time unlike other times. Thus, sleep in the Islamic Golden Age was full of faith, blended with wisdom, orderly like prayer, and solid like knowledge. No chaos, no excess, but part of building the nation. As someone once said, in a time when people were asleep, we were dreaming, and we awoke to achieve the dream. On a cold night, in a wooden hut or stone wall, the journey of sleep begins in Europe during the Middle Ages, a journey unlike the sleep we know today, or even what the East knew, but a sleep where humans escaped their reality to find a few hours of forgetfulness. In that era, darkness was thick. No electricity, no lit streets, only intermittent oil lamps, leaving dancing shadows on walls. The night itself was a living creature, moving slowly. People slept on the ground or on low wooden beds covered with heavy blankets made of sheep's wool or animal skins. There were no luxurious pillows, just a pile of straw covered with rough cloth, possibly containing insects or ash remnants. In villages, rooms were narrow and contained the house's only hearth, so everyone, father, mother, children, slept together in the same room, sometimes in the same bed, not seeking family warmth, but because the cold outside was merciless. Nobles had private rooms with high beds and thick curtains, not for decoration, but to isolate insects, break cold drafts, and give the illusion of privacy in a time that knew little of it.
But even the wealthy did not always sleep comfortably. Anxiety about theft, revolts, disease, and the church crept into beds before sleep. In monasteries, sleep was part of a strict system called canonical hours, where monks awoke at midnight for prayers, then returned to short sleep, then awoke at sunrise, a segmented sleep aimed not at rest, but obedience and discipline. In some old books, it is recounted that Europeans in the Middle Ages slept in two phases: first sleep, then a quiet awakening at midnight for reading,
prayer, or even conversation, then second sleep until dawn. There was no clock on the wall, the rooster was the alarm, or the sound of church bells from afar, telling the peasant to rise for plowing, gathering firewood, or milking cows before the sun awoke. Sleep was linked to superstitions. People believed nightmares were from the devil, that Iblis might crawl at night and sit on your chest, so they placed a wooden cross over the room door, or sacred herb leaves under the pillow to ward off spirits and ensure safe sleep. In castles, guards did not all sleep, but took turns carrying torches and patrolling walls, checking doors and silence. On harsh winter nights, when water froze in jars, people lit charcoal under beds or slept fully clothed, including shoes sometimes, for removing them meant facing deadly cold. Sleep in that era was a necessity, not a luxury, a temporary surrender, not a search for dreams. For those who dream need reassurance, and reassurance was rare. Women would spin before sleep, or mend clothes by the hearth in silence until their eyes closed suddenly, without farewell, just weariness. Men ended their day in taverns, then staggered through dark streets searching for their homes or a bed that did not complain of frost. In the end, when the last candle was extinguished and the last sounds silenced, the night in medieval Europe was not a time for rest, but for escape from a merciless life. Thus, an entire continent slept between stone and wood, between fear and superstition, until a day came and a new sun rose. But that, my friend, is another story. When the dawn of the 15th century broke, Europe began to change. But the change was not noisy. It was like a slow sunrise over the rooftops of Florence, light creeping quietly, not awakening, but paving the way for awakening. People began to view the human body differently, no longer just a vessel for sin, but a machine to be understood, honored, and cared for. Hence, their view of sleep changed. Sleep came to be considered part of health, an element of balance, as written in new medical books inspired by the works of Galen and Ibn Sina, carrying a new understanding of rest. In wealthy homes, private bedrooms began to appear. Families no longer all slept in one room. Sleep became a personal space, perhaps adorned with a mural, or with a holy book or hourglass beside the bed to measure the night's passage.
Beds became more elegant, covered with embroidered curtains, but they still adhered to ancient rituals. One did not sleep without prayer, and the room door was not left open for fear of spirits that had not yet disappeared from European imagination. For artists, the night was different. Leonardo da Vinci, for example, experimented with polyphasic sleep, 15 minutes every 4 hours, to save more time for painting, design, and thought. A strange sleep, but it reflected a mind seeking to reshape the world. In medical books,
doctors began writing about the importance of fresh air before sleep, and that sleeping near an open window was better than under heavy covers. Thus, houses began to be built with larger windows and roofs allowing dawn light to enter. Dawn itself became part of the sleep ritual. In cities, especially in Italy and France, aristocrats slept late after a musical party or long dinner. Servants entered after midnight to extinguish candles and place heaters correctly so the master's body would not grow cold in the hour of frost. For the poor, their sleep differed little from the Middle Ages. Sleep on straw or on sloping wooden planks. But they began to hear of princes' sleep and imagine a bed that did not creak when moving. In that era, drawings depicting sleep itself multiplied. A sleeping woman cradling a child, a man sunk in deep sleep near an open book, or a small king sleeping among clouds. Sleep became something to contemplate, paint, and perhaps understand. In churches, sermons still warned against excessive sleep, describing it as laziness, but they began to distinguish between sleep escaping responsibility and sleep repairing the body, as a sculptor repairs a broken piece of marble. Women developed special rituals before sleep, combing hair, washing feet, fumigating the room with lavender or thyme scent, then glancing in the mirror, for beauty in the Renaissance was also built during sleep. Thus, between a painted panel, a translated book, and a prayer before closing eyes, the sleep of the Renaissance formed. A quiet preceding thought, a rest preceding creativity. And so we move between civilizations, searching the details of the night, in a straw pillow or silk curtain, in the silence of temples and the warmth of huts. Sleep, my friend, was never merely a nap, but a mirror of time, a mirror of humanity. They slept as they used to sleep, quietly under moonlight, in the embrace of history.